Hello, everyone, and welcome to the KCPS Teacher Onboarding webinar. For those joining right now, very sorry for the delay. For those listening at home with the recording, I'm going to wait about another 2 minutes to wait for some more people to sign on, and then from there we can get started. So if you're watching this recording, you can just skip to about 2 minutes in, and that's when we'll actually get started. All right, so we can go ahead and get started. So just to lay out kind of the reason for having this webinar and what we're going to walk through over the next 15 or 20 minutes, basically I wanted to kind of outline some areas of CodeHS and a lot of the tools and resources that you'll be using day to day in the classroom that you might not have been exposed to so far as you've been working through the online professional development course. So here on CodeHS, we have everything that you'll need to teach your computer science class and really find everything all in one place, from teacher tools to resources, and then the support that goes along with it. Hopefully this webinar will kind of serve as a starting point in terms of knowing kind of where to find everything on CodeHS. But if you guys have any questions, if there's anything I haven't answered here in the webinar, feel free to send that over in email, and I would be happy to kind of point you guys in the right direction there. So as many of you have, started using CodeHS and explored both the user and the teacher side of the site, I'm sure some of this might be a bit repetitive, but again, just kind of want to give a pretty thorough overview in terms of all the different areas of the CodeHS website. So here we have a sample teacher page. I'm sure many of you are familiar with your teacher page by now. This is, again, kind of a sample account that I've set up. We have 3 kind of test classes here. So we'll switch back over to the teacher side here in a minute. First, we're going to go to the user side of the site and open up my profile or my user page. And so every account on CodeHS has a user page, whether that person is a teacher or a student. For students, as your guys' students get signed up and kind of brought on board with the start of the school year, they'll be working primarily off of their user page. So let's switch over here to my user page. Again, I'm sure this is a page that many of you are familiar with. From your user page, this is kind of the interface or the portal to all of our course content on CodeHS. So as you can see, and as you know by now, the Introduction to Computer Science course is broken down into 5 main modules. If we click into one of these modules, each unit or module is broken down into lessons. And so the Introduction to Programming with Carol module has 16 lessons. You can see it wraps up here with Carol challenges down at the end. Each lesson is broken down into a couple different activity types. We'll take this Carol Can't Turn Right lesson to start with. Every lesson is introduced by a video tutorial. I'm sure you guys have watched a lot of videos on CodeHS by now. Each video introduces some programming concept that we're teaching through the curriculum. After watching the video, students proceed on to a sample programming exercise. This is kind of pre-populated code that students can play with or tinker with that was kind of an example of what was covered in that video. From there, students move on to actual applied programming exercises. And so many of you have worked through Carol and beyond. You have worked on a lot of the programming exercises that students will work through in your classes this year. So this is kind of the overview of the teacher page, or sorry, of the user page. Again, even though this is a teacher account, this user page looks quite similar to a student's user page will look as they get signed up. The main differences being, students wouldn't have this My Teacher page link here, and some of these links here on the left sidebar would be a bit different. Let's dive into an editor page. So we'll open up Slide Carol, which is one of the first 5 or 6 exercises that students do on CodeHS. By now, I'm sure you're familiar with the kind of editor page and actually completing exercises through CodeHS. We're going to go past the exercise instructions, and we're going to kind of point out some of the information and some of the resources that are kind of here on the periphery of the editor page. Obviously, we have kind of our main 3 areas. This left column here is the kind of prompt for the exercise. We can click this and pull up Show Exercise again. Some documentation. So far we've learned about the turn right function and defining versus calling a function. And we have our 4 Carol commands here. So as you go through the curriculum and as students get further along through the course, this Documentations tab will change a bit and get some more stuff added to it, but the functionality will kind of stay the same, and an easy place for students to refer back to if they need kind of some helpful hints. Here in the middle, we have our code editor. This is where students actually write their code. We can kind of adjust some of the dimensions here. We can collapse and expand this left sidebar if we want a larger area to write our program. And then over here on the right, we have kind of our output. So in Carol, that is a Carol world, so the grid world that Carol lives in and performs all of his or her commands. As students go further through the curriculum, this output here on the right will kind of change. And so it will turn into a canvas and then a console, basically different ways to kind of visually represent the code and the programs that we're writing here in our code editor. As I'm sure you know by now, there are different kind of controls. We can speed up and slow down our program. We can reset the code. We can actually step through step by step. So you see this highlights line by line the command that Carol is completing. So if we added in a put ball here, we could reset and step through this step by step. This step-by-step tool is actually pretty helpful when debugging student programs. And for those of you who have made it that far in the PD course, I'm sure you've worked a lot with that step forward kind of functionality there. So we'll reset. Running through these top tabs here, we can see this exercise tab is another place where students can go and kind of revisit what is the prompt for the exercise or the program that they're trying to write. We also have a documentation tab here, which again, similarly to the docs here on the left side, will kind of expand and change as students are going through the curriculum and as they're learning more and more of the course concepts. So here we kind of start with some of the basic Carol concepts in the docs tab. The help tab, which I'm sure many of you are familiar with by now, the functionality is a bit different on the student and on the teacher side. We'll view the help tab from the teacher perspective here in a little bit. As a student, the student can actually ask questions of the teacher. So They can say, can you help me on this problem? And from here, that student can send a help question to you as the teacher. We'll go through later on how you can access and respond to those help questions, but they can actually submit you help questions similarly to how you as a teacher have access to help and support from our network of online tutors. So in your class, instead of the tutors answering those student help questions, it would be you as the teacher. And then lastly, in the More tab here, we actually have a pretty useful feature, which is the History tab. So every time you run your code, you can see, or sorry, every time a user runs their code on CodeHS, a new entry is created here in the History tab. And so as you run the code in the program more and more times, this History tab will become longer and longer. And what we can do is we can actually reset our code to any point in time that we've run the program. And so a pretty cool way to be able to kind of look back over the lifespan of a program and reset our code, kind of almost like a version control type of feature. Additionally, for you as the teacher, if you're interested in kind of taking a deeper dive into how a student has solved a problem, you can view a student's history tab through the More link here and see exactly how they went through, kind of solving and tackling a certain problem. That is most of the More tab here. And those are kind of the main tabs here on this top right kind of navigation bar that will be most useful as you are, both working through the curriculum for yourself and also helping students as they're working through the course content. So that is a bit more on kind of the user side of the site. For students who are kind of logging in every day to CodeHS, there's a couple of different ways that they can kind of revisit exactly where they picked up or kind of where they left off. You can click the resume button here in the top. There's also the green resume button over here and the up next kind of play button. So if students don't want to actually go into the little lesson and activity icons here, they can click just straight into the resume button and just pick up right where they left off the previous day in class. So that's a bit more on the user page here. Let's go back to the teacher side of the site, because again, I think that's going to be kind of the most useful as we're getting our accounts fully set up and we're getting fully familiarized with all of the kind of teacher tools and resources here on the site. So like I said, setting up classes and adding your students is very easy and straightforward. If I want to add a new class here, I can just click and type in this dialog box, new class, for example. I click the blue add button, and then if we refresh the page here, we'll see that I now have new class. Every class that you create on CodeHS is generated a 4-digit class code. These codes are unique. No two classes share the same 4-digit code. This is the code that students will enter as they are creating their accounts and signing up for student accounts on CodeHS. I will forward some information in a follow-up email with kind of a getting started guide and exactly where to send students to create their accounts. But the first step is to set up all of your classes on your teacher account, and that's something I will also follow up with an email on Monday to get all of your classes fully set up and ready for students to join in the coming weeks. So let's click into one of these classes. We'll click into my Intro to CS first period class. So this is kind of a pre-populated class. I have 4 students in this class here. Obviously, you may have many more than that, but this is kind of a dummy or a test class that I've set up. So right here from the class page, you can see kind of a quick snapshot of your class roster and how far students are through the Introduction to Computer Science course. This kind of, again, provides you that high-level overview of where all of your students are at in the course and how that kind of stacks up in comparison to one another. And we have different kind of filters here. We can organize by first name or last name. We can have the furthest course progress here at the top and descending down to the least far. So different ways to kind of sort that roster. If you ever want to switch a student to a different class or remove them from your class, we can go to the 3 dots drop down here on the right. We can, for Betty Russell, say she dropped my class, we can remove her from that class. We can also switch her into one of my other classes that I've already set up. And so if a student joins the wrong class by accident, very easy to sort them out and switch them into the correct class. As the teacher, you can also change a student's password. So often, more often than not, students might forget their passwords. And so we can easily change that here from the roster page. So that's in this 3 dots menu that you can click into here on the right side. If we scroll up, the 2 kind of main navigation areas on a class page that I want to draw your attention towards is this top navigation bar. You see I'm running my cursor along here. This navigation bar contains a lot of our teacher tools. Teacher tools include tracking student progress, grading student work, student help questions and exercise submissions, setting up a custom syllabus for your class, our gradebook, and a lot more teacher tools here on this top navigation bar. On this left sidebar here, under this would be where your name would be for a typical account, we see a lot of these links. The main link that we'll dive into is our resources link. Resources is where you find resources, teacher resources such as sample solutions and problem guides, classroom handouts that you can use for classroom kind of activities and discussions to make your class a bit more collaborative, and some other resources we'll dive into there in a bit. One more link here is our custom content link. This is a pretty exciting new tool that we've come out with, and something that you might not use until a bit later on in the year. But this is a way that you as the teacher can actually customize and create your own content through CodeHS. So say, for example, you wanted to create a midterm project for students to complete that we didn't have it kind of in line in our standard curriculum. You could create that project through the custom content tool. You can also create quizzes, exercises, kind of free response questions, a lot of pretty cool functionality there. We won't dive into that as much during this webinar since we're just starting off, but definitely something to kind of explore and play with as you get further into the year with CodeHS. Let's transition back over to our teacher tools. So we have the roster, and the roster again is kind of our top level class page. With class progress, we have a couple different ways that we can kind of slice and dice student progress. So obviously seeing percentage completion through the entire course might be useful for kind of a high level snapshot. But if we really want to dive down and kind of look at student progress on a more granular level, that's where this class progress dropdown comes in. So let's click into view progress by activity. This is kind of the most fine detail or most granular way to view student progress. Here on the left side, I see all of my students' names. On the top here, we have each of our lessons. So we have Introduction to Programming with Carol, More Basic Carol, and we have all 16 lessons, if we scroll to the side, that are in Carol. Each of these kind of subtexts are the actual programming exercises. So the written programming exercises that students will complete as they're going through the course. Each exercise gets a little bubble here down in the main area of the class progress view. We have a color code that corresponds to different statuses. So green means that program has been submitted by the student and passed. So it's been graded and returned correctly. That student doesn't need to return to an exercise that's been passed as green. Yellow means submitted, but still is awaiting grading and feedback. We'll go through grading as the next teacher tool, but if you see a student that has a lot of yellow icons, you'll see that they have a lot of kind of outstanding submissions that require our attention as the teacher. The blue and the red icons, we'll get into those a bit more when we go through grading. But when we grade a student's exercise, we can return it as a couple different things, a couple different marks. Those are passed, functionality okay, which is somewhere between passed and failed, and then not passed, which is not correct. Again, we'll go and kind of take a deeper dive into grading here in a moment. In this progress view, again, we can kind of sort by a couple different measures, first name, last name, or recently completed. We can switch the module in the Intro to Computer Science course that we're dealing with. We can also switch the course altogether. As an admin, I have a lot more courses here. Typically, we will be sticking just to the Introduction to Computer Science course for your guys' classes for next year. So this drop-down will pretty much always stay the same. Similarly to activity progress, we also have lesson progress, which is a bit more zoomed out, as well as module progress. And that kind of provides the highest level snapshot, besides for the roster page, in terms of how far students are through a given module. So this class progress tab is something to start exploring. I think it will become a bit clearer and a bit more useful once you have students populated in your class. So this next tool, submissions/questions, this is the area of the site where you actually do your grading. So every time that students submit a programming exercise, anytime they submit a help question, this is the interface that we'll grade that from. So here we have two sections. We have student help questions and student submissions. So obviously, help questions aren't necessarily associated with a submission. So students can ask a help question without having submitted the exercise. Student submissions, anytime an exercise is submitted, the student is saying, okay, I am done with this problem. I'm ready for the teacher to review it. That doesn't necessarily mean that the program or the problem is entirely complete or correct. We'll have to go in and kind of grade that as the teacher. So let's look at the help questions first. I'm going to open up Betty Russell's, actually better yet, we're going to go into her student submission, this 2 towers plus Super Carol. We can also see a timestamp here, which shows when that exercise was submitted. And so we can kind of turn our attention to maybe the longest outstanding submissions, making sure those students get that feedback and grading in a timely manner. So as the teacher, I can actually click into Betty's 2 towers submission and view her code. So this is the program that Betty has written and submitted. And we can actually, just like we can with our own programs, we can run her program. We sped that up a bit. We can go over here to the More tab, and if I want to view her code side by side with a sample solution, we can actually say, how does Betty's program look compared to the sample solution for that problem, and kind of compare the two side by side. Once I'm ready to grade Betty's program, I can click over here to the Help tab. It also looks like she has submitted a help question on this exercise as well, so we can answer both at once. So we can always, anytime we can return a help question or kind of return a response to a student program here through the dialog box. And so, say this was a program that we were satisfied with, Betty has done very correctly, we're satisfied with the results, you can say, great work. And then we can attach a grade or kind of a mark to this exercise. The 3 options again are pass. Pass again is correct, doesn't need any further attention. Reject on the other end means this problem isn't correct. It doesn't solve any of the prompt or any of the assignment that the student was working on in the exercise, and so is incorrect. And then in the middle we have functionality okay. Functionality okay doesn't have a strict definition. What it really means is, a program runs. So say a program, for example, that runs and completes the task at hand. But maybe there's a better way that that student could have written the program. Maybe, for example, they should have defined 3 helper functions instead of here, Betty only defines 2. We as the teacher might return that as functionality okay, which means you're on the right track, it's mostly correct, however, there's a better way or a more efficient way to solve this program. So you as the teacher, as you go through and grade more content and more student submissions, can kind of get a feel for where you want your threshold to be in terms of what sort of work gets what sort of grade or mark there in response. So that is how we grade through the Help tab. Obviously, going through student submissions one by one like this might not be the most efficient way to do this. So if we go back to our grading page, we have a couple of different grade modes that help us. If we have 20 outstanding submissions, we might not want to go through and run every single student program. In that case, we can go into fast grade mode, and there's also grade mode. Grade mode basically takes you back to that same interface with the editor page and the Help tab, but once you grade one student submission, it takes you directly to the next. Fast grade is actually an even more efficient way to grade, and actually provides you with this kind of dashboard where we don't actually run the student's program, but we can compare it again side by side with the solution code. As you get more familiar with the programs in the CodeHS curriculum, and as you kind of look at those programs more and more times with your students and get more familiarized, you might be comfortable kind of just visually inspecting student code rather than having to run that program. So from here, we have a similar kind of interface to the Help tab. We have our dialog box. We have different marks that we can return that student grade. We can even have kind of canned responses, which are different kind of responses that we could insert, that might be common replies on a certain exercise. You can even create your own custom canned responses. So obviously, if you find yourself typing the same thing to a lot of students on the same exercise, you might want to insert a custom canned response to help with that. Overall, fast grade mode, again, is really meant to be a much more efficient and quick way to grade if you have a lot of outstanding student submissions. There's some added functionality here in terms of filters. If we have a lot of student submissions to sift through, we could filter by item name or ID, filter by class, and some different ways that we can kind of find the exact programs that we want to grade. So that is everything here so far in the grading kind of interfaces. We can go back to our roster page. As you see here on the top navigation bar, we have a couple other teacher tools. For the sake of time, I'm not going to dive into those as thoroughly. I just wanted to kind of highlight those. We do have a syllabus tool, which allows you to kind of set out and customize a syllabus for your class on CodeHS, kind of take your class's meeting schedule and map our curriculum and content onto that meeting schedule. We have a grade book, which actually allows you to take student progress on CodeHS and turn it into a letter grade. So for example, if our expected progress, and again, we're kind of glossing over this tool, but something to check out more on your own. Say our expected progress was, we want all students to be at Make a Tower. We could set that expected progress, and then our grading distribution recalculates. And we can see that Alice Allen here has an A+. She's high flying, way past our expected progress point. Whereas Roy King might have a B+, if he's a bit short of Make a Tower. Looks like he's completed up to the problem before. We have different kind of grading schema, so different ways that you can assign point values and weight student work. Again, it's a very powerful tool. It's something that as we just look to kind of get started, accounts might not be something that you dive into as deeply here in the first couple weeks, but something very, very useful to know about for a bit later in the school year. Next, I want to turn our attention over to the Resources tab over here. So again, the resources tab is one of our main places to find a lot of the most useful teacher resources on CodeHS. You'll see in this kind of dashboard here, we have classroom handouts. So we have handouts for every module, which basically say, for example, if you're teaching a lesson on for loops one day in class, you could go into our handouts library and find a handout on for loop and actually lead a class activity or class discussion on for loops. So we see here the third one down is for loops, and we have both student-facing handouts as well as teacher-facing handouts. And you'll see we have these for the pretty much the entire curriculum. We can click over here to problem guides. Problem guides are basically kind of written, basically there's a problem guide for every written programming exercise on CodeHS. So if I open up the problem guide for Dizzy Carroll, for example, problem guides contain not just sample solutions, which we can see here, every problem guide has a solution, but it also kind of lays out the motivation for the problem, why, what are we trying to accomplish? What are some of the common student questions and errors? Where might students run into trouble on this? And as the curriculum and the content gets a bit more complex, the problem guides will kind of expand with those to accompany each of the exercises. We have lesson plans. So every lesson, as I mentioned, each of the modules or units on CodeHS are broken down into lesson. So each lesson has a corresponding lesson plan, which helps you kind of plan out that lesson with CodeHS. What are some of the kind of handouts you might be able to use, the problem guides, activities you could lead in the classroom to make that more collaborative, and different kind of helping to kind of piece together the different resources. Going back to the resources dashboard, again, I'm not going to dive into all of this because there's a lot here, but one of the main areas that you'll likely go to pretty frequently to kind of find what you need in terms of a lot of the teacher resources you'll be using kind of week in and week out in your classroom. So those are the main areas that I wanted to kind of run through both on the teacher and on the user side of CodeHS. I'm not sure if there's anyone on here right now, if you have access to the Q&A app. I can kind of switch over here and we'll actually stop the screen share. And we can go, if you see on the left side of your window, there's a kind of blue Q&A button. We can click into Q&A, and it looks like that feature might not be enabled at the moment. Give me one moment, I can see if I can get that working here. All right, looks like Q&A isn't working, but on the top left, you'll see a chat button. It's a blue icon. So if, for the couple of viewers who are still here, if you guys want to enter any messages or any questions in the kind of chat feature, we can tackle some of those questions, dive into some areas of the site that you might have wanted some more explanation or more detail on. I'm also happy to answer any of those questions in follow-up emails or conversations. We'll just, we can take a minute. If you guys have any questions, feel free to enter that into the group chat feature. All right, well, it looks like nobody has any questions for now. I'm going to wrap up this recording, and I'll be sending out the link for later viewing. Again, if you guys have any questions, if there are areas of the site that I kind of glossed over here in the webinar that you want kind of deeper explanation into, feel free to shoot me an email. Happy to hop on the phone or send over any kind of further information on any areas of the site that we explored here today. Thank you guys very much for taking the time to either join here today over the webinar or view this later on at home, and looking forward to getting everyone's accounts, classes, and students set up on CodeHS for the year ahead. Thank you.